if you have a bullet journal, like you can basically practice all the types of self-care through your trackers. My name is Giya Venus, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about metaphysics and mental health. This is a little segment that I'll be putting together to help us understand how our spirituality and our mental health are linked and how they complement each other. Today we're going to be talking about self-care. And now when people say self-care, which is kind of a buzzword, so when people say self-care, they think, let me take a day at the spa, let me buy like bath bombs galore. But did you know that self-care is actually 6 different things? There's 6 different things that you can do in order to care for yourself, 6 different things you should be doing. So we're going to explore those today. So to begin the topic about self-care, we need to talk about what the self is and how we care for it in the first place. So the self is a theoretical construct that really talks about the I and the me in the context of your life. So when I talk about self, I'm talking about you and how you identify as an individual. When we talk about care then, we're going to be talking about how you will care for the individual. And this is where self-care is incredibly personalized. No 2 people are going to necessarily benefit the same from any self-care technique, which is why there's so many people sharing lots of different ways that you can care for your individual self. So let's get into the first type of self-care. The first type of self-care is emotional self-care. Emotional self-care are activities that help you to connect, process, and reflect a full range of emotions. So this means not only are you going to feel happy, but you are also going to be doing things like handling feeling sad, handling feeling angry. So some things that you can do is see a therapist, right? Especially when we have those more negative emotions, or not negative, but distressing emotions. Because some people feel distressed when they're happy. You know, they feel happy and then they say, I don't want this. Writing in a journal. And journaling is something that has become super popular again. I don't know if it ever really went out of style, but it's come back with a vengeance. And there are millions, hundreds of billions of different types of people with all kinds of journals. You can also just opt for the old-fashioned composition notebook and just write your thoughts down there. Creating art. So if you are somebody who is very artistic and you express yourself creatively through painting, sculpture, or even if you are a musically inclined person and you like to sing, if you play an instrument, or if you are into performing arts like acting and dancing, then those are things that you can do to take care of yourself emotionally. Now, the second one is one that people don't usually talk about. And honestly, until I researched this a couple years ago, I did not realize that this was a form of self-care. So practical self-care. Practical self-care consists of tasks that you complete in order to fulfill core aspects of your life and prevent future stressful situations. So these are going to be activities that help you feel fulfilled in your day-to-day life. So something that I am learning to do is create a budget, plan how you're going to spend the money that you make and earn. For some people, this can cause them anxiety, but if you are practicing emotional self-care, then you'll be able to handle this kind of tough thing that a lot of people don't like to think about. Next, we have taking professional development classes. This is a great way to increase your knowledge so that when you go out into the world, you have more information and more tips and tricks and tools at your disposal in order to navigate the world successfully. The next one, not to be confused with practical self-care, is physical self-care. So these are the things that are a little bit more traditionally and virally touted to be self-care. So they are things that you do to improve your physical well-being and health. So things like taking supplements, eating healthy, things that include exercise and sleeping, enough. I'm not going to say 8 hours a day because I know not everybody needs to sleep that long, and some people need to sleep longer than that. Knowing how to track your cycle if you are a person who menstruates, or even creating a log of the food that you've eaten. If you have a bullet journal, like, you can basically practice all the types of self-care through your trackers. So if you are a bullet journal person, then I would suggest getting a bullet journal, or else you'll end up with a million different pages. Or honestly, if you'd like to just section off a piece of your regular journal to keep track of all these things, what you've tried and what has worked and what hasn't worked, then you can do that too. But physical self-care is one that everybody seems to know about. These are, like, again, buying your bath bombs and lip balms and body butters, things like that. Those are all physical self-care practices. A note on physical self-care: something like taking a walk counts as exercise. You don't have to go to the gym for 4 hours in order to practice physical self-care in the form of movement. So our next one is mental self-care. A lot of these kind of sound similar, but they're not. There's a little bit of a distinction. Mental self-care are activities stimulate your mind or your intellect. So things like reading a book, solving puzzles, going to a museum, playing chess, things like that are all going to be mental self-care. Not to be confused with mental health self-care or emotional self-care, which would be doing things like going to a therapist. The fifth type of self-care is social self-care. So social self-care are activities that nurture and deepen your relationships with the people in your life. So when you think about going out with your friends, that is a way to practice social self-care. The tricky part comes when you are hanging out with people who you don't really like or who are not good for your emotional self-care. In that case, there's a little bit of discernment that needs to be exercised. But going out with friends, going on a date, dating, and making time for your partner are absolutely social self-care practices. So even if you're an introvert and you've got 2 friends, hanging out with those 2 friends is social self-care. Something that I do as social self-care is making time to call people that I like, that I love, that I care about, who I know care about me. So making plans to talk to your mom or your dad or your sister or your best friend on the phone are also social self-care practices. Humans are social beings. And like I said, even if you're an introvert and you don't really like being around lots of people, it's still important to get that little bit of socialization in so that you can have a holistic human experience. The last type of self-care, which is the type that I'll be talking about most on this channel, is spiritual self-care. So spiritual self-care are activities that nurture your spirit and allow you to think bigger than yourself, which is funny because the idea of self-care is deeply rooted in your personal experience of yourself, but this aspect of spirituality is integral to that experience as well. Spiritual self-care does not mean that you have to go to church if you are not religious. That's not what it's about. So practices like meditating, yoga, going to a place of worship, even if that means, for me, it's my backyard, it's my place of communion with the divine. And dedicate time for self-reflection. Again, journals come very much in handy when we talk about all aspects of self-care, and planners. So if you found one that you like, then I would absolutely go and get it. If it's a multi-use, then that's a bonus. So these 6 aspects of your self-care practice, things that you should be doing at least 1 or 2 of a day, or at least setting time aside to do specific ones, is going to help you really enrich your human experience. Being cared for is something that helps us have the opportunity to do things like explore what we feel consciousness is. And I would even dare say something like spiritual self-care is not made possible without the other 5. And things like social self-care, they're very intertwined and interdependent. So when we think about self-care, I'm going to challenge you to think about ways that you can do it that are different, that are one of the ways that we tried today. And in the comments, Let me know which one you plan on practicing this week. And I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of practical self-care this week. I'm going to be doing a lot of mental self-care this week, because when it gets summery and hot, I tend to feel like a noodle and I don't want to do anything. So it's important for me to do those things so that I can have a fulfilled experience. If you haven't already, make sure that you click the subscribe button and follow me on all of the social media, which will be down in the notes below. Until then, see you later.